Teaching someone to write is one of the most important things we can do. It's not just about memorizing grammar rules. It's about unlocking this incredible ability to turn our thoughts into powerful, persuasive words. So how do the experts actually do it? Let's dive in and find out. We've all been there, right? Staring at that blinking cursor on a totally blank page. Writing is just plain tough. It forces us to plan, organize, and think critically, pretty much all at the same time. So if it's that hard to do, just imagine how challenging it must be to teach. So what's the big secret here? Well, it all comes down to a really fundamental shift in thinking. For the longest time, the focus was all on the final, polished essay. But the modern approach? It's all about the entire journey, the messy, creative, and sometimes chaotic process of how a writer actually gets from point A to point B. And believe me, this one change completely redefines everything. That journey really kicks off with our first core strategy, focusing on the process itself. It's about demystifying the how. How does a tiny little idea transform into a coherent piece of text? I'll tell you this much. It's not magic. It's a series of deliberate and totally teachable steps. This whole idea is called process writing, and the best way to think about it is to imagine a sculptor shaping a piece of clay, not a driver just following a straight road. A sculptor adds a little, takes some away, and is constantly stepping back to see the bigger picture. Well, that's exactly how writing works. It's this recursive cycle of thinking, drafting, and refining. Now, this journey is usually broken down into 5 stages. It all starts with pre-writing, which is really just about getting ideas out, no matter how wild. Then you move into drafting, where just getting the words on the page is way more important than making them perfect. And here's a super crucial distinction. Revising is about rethinking the big ideas, the content. Editing, on the other hand, is for polishing up the small stuff, like grammar and spelling. And finally, publishing gives the work a real purpose and an audience. This quote just hits the nail on the head. It gets to the core of the idea. Writing is not a one-way street. You could be in the middle of editing and suddenly realize you need to rethink an entire section, which sends you right back to the drawing board. It's this constant, dynamic cycle of creation and refinement. Okay, so that covers the how of writing, the whole process. But the process kind of changes depending on the what. The type of text you're creating has its own unique set of rules. Which brings us to our second key concept, understanding genre. Honestly, the easiest way to think about genre is to see it as a recipe or a blueprint. I mean, you wouldn't use a cake recipe to build a house, right? It's the same thing with writing. The structure and the style you'd use for a scientific lab report are going to be completely different from what you'd use for a poem or a business email. Exactly. Each genre has its own purpose and its own key features. A persuasive essay needs a strong thesis statement to convince you of something. A business email has to have a formal structure to inform or request. And a story? Well, that relies on plot and character to entertain us. Knowing the blueprint is absolutely essential if you want to communicate effectively. All right, so we've got a process and we've got a blueprint. But how does a writer actually get better? How do they improve? That's where the final piece of this puzzle comes in, the incredible power of feedback. This right here is what fuels real growth. But here's the thing, it's all about the kind of feedback we give. Just circling a sentence and writing awkward next to it, that's pretty much useless. It tells the writer what's wrong, but gives them zero clue about why it's wrong or how to fix it. Effective feedback, though, is like a dialogue. Asking a guiding question, something like, "Can you clarify this idea a bit more?" That invites the writer to rethink and solve the problem for themselves. It really empowers them in the process. And hey, this isn't just about the teacher's red pen. When you structure it correctly, peer editing can be incredibly powerful. By using checklists to stay focused and encouraging writers to ask very specific questions, students get a sense of control over the whole process. And this simple shift can transform a classroom into a collaborative workshop, where suddenly, everyone is a teacher. So, let's recap. We've looked at 3 P strategies: the process, the genre, and feedback. But here's the thing, they don't really work in isolation. Let's see how they all combine to create a truly confident writer. When you boil it all down, the formula is actually pretty simple. When a writer masters their process and they know the genre's blueprint inside and out, and they get actionable feedback along the way, well, they have all the tools they're ever going to need. These 3 elements really empower each other. And this is the real payoff. This integrated approach solves that classic problem of the blank page. It creates writers who aren't just blindly following a set of rules, but who are confident, skilled, and truly independent thinkers. They take ownership of their craft because they finally understand it from the inside out. In the end, when we teach writing this way, we're not just building a skill. We're giving someone a permanent tool for self-expression, for inquiry, and for connection. We're empowering a voice, and that is a lesson that lasts a lifetime.